Prepare. And you're good.
Thanks. Welcome to this week's episode of What's the Tea? I'm Lysandra Hutchinson, the community resource specialist here at ANEW. And today I have my guest with me, Megan Rodgers. And for those of you guys that don't know, April is actually not only Sexual Assault Awareness Month, but it's also Child Abuse Prevention Month. And so we thought that this was prime time to talk about the intersection of both of those forms of violence and just hear from Megan, who works in the sexual assault field, and learn more about what's being done with child sexual abuse at this time. And so if you are with us right now, make sure you share this video, make sure you grab your tea and share this video with your friends. So Megan, thank you. You've been with us before and you're back. We're excited.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you so much. Can you just introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit about what you do at the YWCA?
Sure. So my name is Megan Rodgers. I am the manager of Advocacy and Crisis Intervention for the YWCA South Suburban Center, which is located in Chicago Heights. So with advocacy work, what we do is anytime an individual has disclosed sexual assault and goes to a local emergency room, we are dispatched to that emergency room to be with that survivor through the whole forensic medical exam and process. Whether the survivor chooses to do that or not, we show up and really provide them with their options and educate them on what this process looks like. Outside of the hospital, we also go with survivors, whether they need to go to law enforcement, a children's advocacy center, courthouses, and just provide that support through the whole investigation and criminal proceedings that they may face.
Wow, this is really important work. And can you tell us a little bit about what brought you to this work?
Sure, it's actually a little crazy. So I went to school at both Prairie State and Governor State.
Okay.
And while I was at Prairie State, the goal was to come out with a degree in psychology and to work with violent offenders that were going to soon be released from the prison system.
Mm-hmm.
I came across a presentation in one of my psychology classes, and they were looking for volunteers at the Y. And I figured what a great opportunity to remember victim side, seeing as how I wanted to work with offenders.
Wow.
Yeah, so I got into it, not even finishing my associate's degree. And by the time I went for my bachelor's, I had to do an internship, and I chose to do it at the Y. And it was really in that time that I found that my passion was 100% with survivors of violence and not the perpetrators of violence.
Wow, so that's pretty awesome. So you basically made a complete shift from what you intended to do in the beginning. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. It's crazy what you learn when you get your hands into stuff, right?
Yeah. So how long has it been now that you've been doing this work?
I've been with the Y for a total of 4 years now.
Okay.
However, lifelong experience as a survivor of child sexual abuse myself.
Yeah.
So it's really, really ignited my passion in these 4 years with the Y.
Wow. That's amazing. So as we're talking about this, can you talk a little bit about the intersection of sexual assault and child abuse and really help us understand what is the experience of an adult survivor of child sexual abuse?
Right. So I think really for you all, maybe not the general public, but for you working in DV, it's kind of easy to understand. It is such a complex thing outside of just sexual assault, right? So if you have someone who has been assaulted by a stranger, it's a one-time deal. Of course, they might experience PTSD or, a shift in their perception of the world. But when we're talking about children who were groomed and manipulated their whole lives to believe maybe this was love or coming from an individual who was supposed to love them, the complexities of overcoming that
Mm.
are far greater than most can imagine. And the instances of complex PTSD are much more prevalent in adult survivors of child sexual abuse versus just a survivor of one-time sexual abuse.
Can you explain a little bit about what complex PTSD means?
Sure. So PTSD, as everyone kind of gathers, a lot of times we talk about this in war. So have you
Mm.
experienced a traumatic experience?
Yeah.
You'll get those flashbacks, nightmares, hypervigilance, some
Mhm.
anxiety, depression.
Yeah.
Well, with that complex PTSD, it's not just one instance. It is the years of abuse, the several instances. So that hypervigilance comes from a different place. And not
Mhm.
only it's hard to understand from a clinical perspective, but really from that survivor's perspective. Every time that survivor might think they've got a grasp on their triggers, they might catch a whiff of freshly cut grass and realize that they have yet another memory that they
Wow.
passed through.
Wow. In your experiences, at what point do adult survivors tend to seek help? And do they make the connection that their hypervigilance or triggers are connected to the abuse?
So I say this in two ways. One, I think the numbers go as high as estimating that 85% of adult survivors of child sexual abuse never report it at all. So it's
Mm.
hard for me to kind of estimate
Yeah.
when and where this looks like. We do
Yeah.
see a lot when there is a child who's been sexually abused and we're responding, say, to the hospital and in an emergency room. A lot of those parents or guardians that have brought that child in will disclose that they themselves had been a victim of this in their life as well. So it's those open dialogues bring that out in the adult survivors a whole lot in my experience.
Okay. What are some of the physical implications for adult survivors?
Actually, it's up to about 70% of adult survivors have been diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome or that, PTSD, complex PTSD, a lot of gut health issues. So acid reflux and Crohn's disease, things like fibromyalgia. There seems to be this really high prevalence of adult survivors. And then we also see that in adult women who are incarcerated. I think it's almost 90% of adult women who are incarcerated report that they were victims of child sexual abuse.
I've heard this. What are some of the ways that counselors or advocates support survivors in terms of helping them heal and work through the trauma? What are things that they're suggested to do, or what are the modalities that are put
So
in place?
first thing, of course, is always believe a survivor that discloses,
Okay.
always. One of the things that we are taught, it's required for us to be 40-hour trained in sexual assault crisis response, is that response can come out in a variety of ways. Some
Mhm.
survivors are actually laughing in the emergency room right after they've been assaulted.
Mhm.
We come to learn that that is a trauma response.
Mhm.
So what an average person who's not trauma informed might see as this is a lie, we can see it
Mm.
very clearly that it's a trauma response.
Mm. Yeah.
So really meeting people where they're at
Okay.
is so important, and in acknowledging that you believe them. I
Yeah.
find the easiest way to do that is to simply say, I'm so sorry that we're meeting this way, or I'm so sorry that this has happened to you, because you're
Okay.
validating them, you're believing them simply by saying, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. So in terms of your work at the Y, what programs do you have in place and initiatives are there in place to address child abuse prevention?
Sure. So each of us kind of does our have our individual things in advocacy, right? So one of our advocates actually goes to meetings about youth. So there is a group called FYI, it's like for your information, out of Matson, that they meet and talk about getting youth programming out there, right? So give the kids something to do instead of having to find something themselves to do. One of the advocates also works with the criminal justice system and youth. Myself, I am a part of the Cook County Human Trafficking Task Force, which branches off into a child trafficking task force. I also am a member of ANU's Safe from the Start Coalition. So we really try and get out there and understand all the different kinds of violence that children are facing, because so often, more than not, it is overlapped in our work, and we see that almost every day.
Wow. Is there a correlation between an adult experiencing sexual assault and them having experienced child sexual abuse?
Yeah, so actually, just over a third of women who experienced childhood sexual abuse have also experienced sexual assault at
Okay.
some point in their life after turning 18. And the
Hmm.
numbers for men are not very clear. Men tend to not report.
No,
There's a
right.
stigma around that. So you see the numbers vary drastically when you look at men and boys. So I don't really have an exact number on them. But for women, they're also more likely to get involved in domestic violence relationships because they've gone in that power and control struggle their whole life and gone through that cycle through child sexual abuse and think that's very normal in their adult years and end up becoming vulnerable to those intimate partner violence relationships.
Absolutely. Wow. So with your work in terms of child sexual abuse or child abuse prevention work, what are some of the most difficult aspects of moving that work forward? What are the barriers to that aspect that you hear?
I think a lot of it is that it's a horrible topic to discuss, and
Yeah.
most people don't want to talk about horrible topics. So
Yeah.
you get a lot of pushback when you want to talk about these things, and a lot of people say, "Oh no, that wouldn't happen where I
Mhm.
live, or my child knows better, knows that they can come to me." Um, but it's something that people have to hear, right? So I think hitting people with kind of statistics like it's over 90% of kids know their abuser. So, really letting parents and adults, teachers, schools know these things, and just keep on pushing forward and getting that information out there as much as you can.
I just in talking to people that experience child sexual abuse in the home, like in the 50s and 60s, in their experiences, there was almost nothing done. Like they didn't feel as though they had anyone to turn to. Would you say that we've advanced a lot through the generations?
I can't say we've advanced a lot, but yes, we've definitely advanced. I mean, children essentially had no rights back then. And sometimes I wonder, do they? Moving forward, because you see it so much that it's almost like, well, has anything been done? But I think that when you're in this work, you get a little more jaded. I know in Illinois, the laws have changed so drastically. And I compare a lot to Indiana because we're so close to them. And I always say Indiana's in caveman times in comparison. Because in Illinois, at 13 years old, a child is an adult in our eyes. So not legally, but when we're in that hospital room, if you are 13 and older, we can kick mom and dad out to talk to that survivor alone, because most of the time they do know their abuser, and oftentimes it's someone who's in their house. They need that opportunity to be able to speak with us without someone in the room that maybe they don't want the parent to know, who the abuser was, or maybe they've told the parent doesn't believe them. But there's still that, we watch for the 12 and under. You've got to wonder sometimes if it is best to still allow parents to make those decisions when we know it's commonly someone that or someone in your home.
Wow. So what is your course of action if they are experiencing sexual abuse in the home or by a neighbor or family members at school or in the community? What steps should they take or can they take?
So first of all, definitely have the child go to an emergency room to be checked out. So emergency rooms are the only place that you can actually have a sexual assault evidence collection kit done.
Okay.
But more importantly, the people who do those exams are called SANEs. So they're sexual assault nurse examiners, and they're specially trained in forensic evidence collection for sexual assault. So when you're talking a kiddo, they are the greatest people on earth to do these exams. Even if, the time frame is in question, maybe evidence can't be collected. That is the first step, because that'll put you in touch with advocates. It'll put you in touch with free counseling services, education services, case management services, really anything that you would need to get that child through those hard times. Of course, we get DCFS involved. We're all mandated reporters. So, if I've got a 5-year-old who says, mom's boyfriend did this, first call is going to be to DCFS and get that boyfriend out of the house and make sure that kid is safe. So really it's a team effort, but that first stop, the emergency room, is by far the most important, because you will be set up with everybody. Every player of the game will be involved at that point.
Awesome. So what emergency rooms have the relationships with the YWCA or other sexual assault organizations in which they would make those phone calls?
So every single hospital in the state of Illinois has a relationship with a rape crisis center. In the south suburbs, we serve Franciscan and Olympia Fields, Advocate South Suburban and Hazelcrest, Ingalls and Harvey, Little Company of Mary in Evergreen Park, and Advocate Christ in Oak Lawn. So if you are under 13, you are automatically transferred to a pediatric SANE hospital. So for us, it is Advocate Christ. They have Hope Children's. So they have a separate pediatric emergency room. And then Ingalls transfers to Comer Children's. But our south side location covers Comer Children's. So they have, I believe, 7 hospitals of their own. And then we have a center in DuPage County that covers the entire county.
Okay. Wow. Awesome. That's amazing. It's good to know. Awesome. What about adults? If adults learn or they are suspecting that a child is being abused, they can take them to the emergency room. What if they call a rape crisis center? Can they make those phone calls, or would they need to call DCFS, or what other things can they do if they're just suspecting? Because maybe it's not in the moment. They don't know if they go to the emergency room if they would find anything, but they're just suspicious that something's going on.
So we always advise to go to the emergency room and get checked out for 2 reasons. One, go with your gut. If you're suspecting that a child is being sexually abused, better safe than sorry. So we still come out. We do get a lot of those calls where, maybe parents are divorced and the child came home and has a rash on their genitalia, and they're like, hey, I don't even know if this is anything, but this isn't normal. That's okay. Still get your kiddo checked out, of course, right? But they can always call the rape crisis centers themselves and get guidance. Some people choose to do law enforcement first. Really, there's no wrong way to do it. Just reaching out and saying, hey, I don't know what's going on, but I have a hunch will get you the help you need from pretty much any entity.
Okay. What are some of the other signs? So you mentioned if a child had a rash that was out of nowhere, what are some other signs that folks should look out for?
So really any behavioral changes, if a child used to be really outgoing and now is isolating,
Mhm.
sometimes children act things out when they're playing with dolls, or if they're drawing, they may draw
Mhm.
some stuff that kind of makes you question if something's going on with them.
Yeah.
And something I hear a lot, definitely, is regression, right? So maybe a 6-year-old has started wetting their bed again. It's definitely a common one. Fear, sudden fear of someone. So if this is a family member, maybe someone you don't see a lot, you went to a party, everything was fine. 7 months later, you're going to another party at a family's house, and now this child is adamant that they do not want to be around this aunt or uncle or cousin, whoever it may be.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. What are other agencies doing about this, or what are some of the other agencies that do this work?
Really, all social service
All social
organizations,
services.
right?
Okay. Okay.
Excuse me. And so we work very closely with you all, of course.
Yep.
So if we have kids who it's overlapped with domestic violence, which we see a whole lot of, we always encourage our clients not only to stick with our services, which are aimed at the sexual abuse, but to also seek those services with any overlap, right? We always call it sexual assault and. So we have and domestic violence and human trafficking, maybe homelessness, mental illness. We try and get as many players involved as we can to help survivors, no matter what they're going through in their life. So I know, like you all, just like us, we have these education departments that are wonderful that go out and teach from preschool age all the way through college. Of course, age appropriate things. I know on our end, it's good touch, bad touch. I think you guys all do hands are not for hitting. And then more recently, I've noticed I came across a wonderful human trafficking organization called Honorable Women, Inc. And it is ran by a woman named Lakeisha Walker, who does classes for youth that are based around like self-esteem and self-love, self-awareness, really learning who you are. So maybe not focusing so much on what's happened to you, but who you are becoming. And then she has also recently talked about, I'm not sure if she's gone through with it, but doing like summer camps for kids. So once again, having that kind of diversion out there to get kids away from the violence.
That's awesome. Wow. So this is hard work to do. I think this is hard. Probably this is sensitive work. The thought of children being harmed, I think, evokes a lot of emotion for a lot of people, especially those that have been through it, but even those that haven't gone through it. If folks want to get more involved with this just because they're passionate, how can they? Is there a room for volunteers, or is this something you definitely have to go back to school for? How could someone get involved with this?
We are always looking for volunteers. Our
Okay.
volunteers are like angels to us.
Wow.
So with advocacy, we use volunteers for those hospital responses. All that is required is that you are 18 and have reliable transportation. Of course, you have to do background checks, so you can't be a perpetrator of these crimes.
Absolutely.
But you go through our 40-hour training, just like staff has, and go on that on-call schedule and provide the services.
Okay.
Obviously, that's not for everyone, but you can always, I think at all nonprofits, we have volunteers in some capacity or another. So if someone really has a passion, I'd say, find a nonprofit that gets you going and seek out those volunteer opportunities.
That's good. You heard it here, folks. So if you are interested, go ahead to the YWCA website and make a phone call, send an email. And this is an awesome opportunity. I'm sure there are people that maybe didn't major in psychology or didn't get their degree, but this is still something heavy on their heart and their minds, and they would want to be a part of this. So
Yes, our volunteers come from such a diverse background.
Yeah.
For instance, one is a retired nurse. So she saw this kind of stuff and now she's like,
That's
hey, I'm
right. Okay.
retired. I want to stay in this.
Wow.
College students to actually one of our volunteers is a chemist. And this is
Okay.
just something she loves to do and help.
Wow.
So we have
Awesome.
great, great people out in the South
That's
Suburbs that
so
want to help.
amazing. Okay. That's so amazing. So when you think about those that volunteer in this work, your people like yourself, your colleagues, with the intensity of this sexual assault, child abuse, how do you guys take care of yourselves? Because I'm sure you hear a lot of stories and have to get involved with a lot of you see a lot of trauma. How do you stay motivated and how do you employ self-care here?
Right. So I think everybody's a little different. I always laugh when we put up those self-care charts, like this is what you can do.
Yeah.
And I always poke fun at healthy eating because I'm like, when I had a bad day, I want a cookie. Like cookies
I want a
are
cupcake.
right, a nothing bundt cake, something sweet, right?
Yeah.
But we all have our usual go-tos, right? That we try to do all the time. For myself, I sit in silence every single morning. I get up with the birds at 5 a.m., but I don't start till 9. So I give myself an hour every day to
Good.
not turn on my TV, not talk. I don't turn on lights. I just make coffee and
Mhm.
wander over to the couch and sit in silence and try to get my mind right.
Okay.
But we're human. So we break. We absolutely will. And we're the first to tell each other when we're at our breaking point.
Yeah.
Something I'm super grateful for is, my team itself, and then others that I work with that maybe don't work for the Y.
Yeah.
We can all see it in each other. We all know when we're tired, and we really take care of one another. We really reach out and say, if it's on my team, hey, let me take your shift. I know you had a really bad call. For instance, one of our advocates had a child call, and the child was also physically beaten pretty badly. So we just step up and step in for each other and try to do as best we can and recognize that sometimes we're going to carry it and try to let it go. We all try to process, but we know in this work you can get stuck sometimes just going and going, but we really just rely heavily on each other and those that are in this work to support us to get through the hard days.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Are there other approaches to self-care that you hear from colleagues as well in terms of what they're doing on the day-to-day or
Yeah, some people work out like crazy, and kudos to them. My alarm is not going off that early for me to move. But I always have to goof with one of them. She always says she's going to eat an apple. An apple is her self-care. So whenever it's a rough day, it's like, okay, are you going to eat
go get an apple?
Right.
Yep.
One of our newest advocates paints.
Okay.
So you know that he's had a rough day if you see him on Facebook.
Yeah. Nice.
But I think we all just know what normally works for us.
Yeah.
So we just keep on indulging in those things, whether it's once a week or once a day, really try to stay on track and then know that about each other. So if is the one that likes to eat apples, it's when's the last time you had an apple, and just
it's about that time.
Okay. And then the Y itself, they do stuff like they call them Wellness Wednesdays. So on Wednesdays, they'll have somebody, whether it's teaching you how to cook a certain thing or I don't know, I think there was a dancing one the one time. Just a space to go and be on the clock and yet take care of yourself.
That's amazing. Can I ask what if there is the most fulfilling, if there's a most fulfilling aspect of this work for you?
You know what? I think every single advocate out there can agree with me on this. It is truly the biggest honor to be that person that can give someone hope in the worst time of their life.
Mm,
So
wow.
every call, no matter how hard it is, we get hugs, we get tears, we get thanked. And
Yeah.
that is 100% what we do it for, is knowing, we gave you hope. And that's what
Wow.
we do. Yeah.
Oh, that's really good. That's really, really good. Thank you. Any other thoughts that you want to share?
I don't know. I thank you all for being there, because of how much we're seeing an increase in domestic violence in our calls. And knowing that there's such wonderful people out there that do this similar work, different field, but that we can really count on to be there for us and our survivors.
Yeah, we have some amazing people here at Edinu that are just absolutely brilliant at what they do. So thank you for that. Absolutely. Rachel, are there any questions in the chat?
No, not at this moment, but
Okay.
I want to say that it has been a great interview. You guys are really informative, and I know our clients and our people are going to just love it when they will end up watching it.
Thank you.
Okay, well, can you, Megan, tell people how they can find you?
Sure. Easiest way is the internet. So
Okay.
www.ywcachicago.org.
Okay.
We are also, so my office is located at 320 West 202nd Street in Chicago Heights.
Okay.
And our office phone number is 708-754-0286.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. So everyone, be sure to share this interview. This is such an important interview. This is Child Abuse Prevention Month. It's also Sexual Assault Awareness Month. So share, share, share. If you want to get involved as a volunteer, if you know others that want to volunteer, be sure to refer them to the YWCA. And make sure that you tune in next time for What's the Tea. It'll be the same time, same place, different tea. And I want to thank you for watching. Megan, thank you so much. This was absolutely amazing. I appreciate you for doing this.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.